Super Founders, What Data Reveals About Billion-Dollar Startups, by Ali Tamaseb. This summary is brought to you by Hook My Book. The author's goal is to discuss what made billion-dollar startups different from other startups, and what contributed to their success. By analyzing data from different sources, the author concludes that the majority of billion-dollar startups don't match the stereotypes that are often perpetuated by others, including Ivy League dropouts, prior experience in accelerator programs, and being the first to market. This book tells the story of several billion-dollar startups. The data in the book informs the author's argument, and the author interviews founders and investors to help fill in the details. The book covers topics like market creation, fundraising, and work experience. Some of the companies mentioned in the book will lose their unicorn status, but the author hopes that the insights in the book will be useful and practical for aspiring entrepreneurs. The best venture capitalists look for founders and teams with strong characteristics when evaluating companies, and successful founders often have a lot in common. Idea and technology behind a startup and secondary factors. Age doesn't matter. Some people start billion-dollar startups when they are 19, and other people start billion-dollar startups when they are above 50. Although age doesn't seem to be a very important factor in a company's success, the younger founders usually create larger value overall. The average age for a founder of a startup is about 34 years old. Founders who were 34 or older often had a long history of entrepreneurship. There is no appreciable advantage to being young or old when it comes to founding a startup. The myth of having a co-founder. There's another myth that founders will fail if they don't have a partner alongside them. These myths may lead aspiring founders to team up with someone they may not be compatible with, to avoid having to pitch as a solo founder. There are several advantages to founding a company solo. Often, when founding a company, conflicts will arise between co-founders. A solo founder may have a better chance of succeeding if they have a previous track record of success. Additionally, a solo founder may have a better understanding of the company's workings since they have been through the process before. In most cases, the co-founders of startups are people who have gone to the same school or worked at the same company together. It is also common for the founders of startups to have a clear division of responsibilities, a clear decision on who is CEO from the beginning, and the ability to communicate well with each other. Co-founders can be useful, but venture capitalists tend to avoid investing in those who are related, either by blood or by marriage. It simply seems risky. Running a business is hard enough without having to mix in personal feelings or family history. College dropout and entrepreneurship. Looking at the data, most founders of billion-dollar companies were not school dropouts. Most founders of billion-dollar companies have a bachelor's degree or a bachelor's and an MBA. Founders with a master's degree or a PhD are also common. For some founders, higher education offers a vantage point from which to understand a complicated market or highly technical product. A university's rank doesn't seem to be as important as its culture and location when it comes to producing successful entrepreneurs. Some high-ranking schools don't produce as many billion-dollar startup founders as other schools with a strong entrepreneurial culture. However, other schools with a strong entrepreneurial culture, such as the University of Southern California, the University of Michigan, and Brigham Young University, do produce several billion-dollar startup founders. Some people think it's important to have corporate experience so that founders have a template to follow when starting their own company, while others think corporate experience is overrated and that someone who wants to start a company should just do it, ideally as soon as possible. The data shows that both approaches work. There is no one path to becoming a billion-dollar founder. Some jumped into their startups right away, while others had 40 years of work experience before starting their billion-dollar company. The average founding CEO has had 11 years of work experience before starting their billion-dollar company. Super founder. In the world of venture capital, many of the pitches we see are from first-time founders. However, when it comes to billion-dollar companies, it's less common to hear from founders who have successfully sold a company before. However, many of the super founders in the world have previous experience as startup founders. The thing that matters is whether a founder has successfully scaled a company to a certain size or outcome. For example, if a founder has built a company that has raised $10 million or more in revenue, it makes them a super founder. Super founders are the people who can land on their big idea without much past success. Founders with past failure are 1.6 times more likely to build a billion-dollar startup in their next try, while those with even a modest exit, oftentimes considered a failure in the world of venture capital, are 3.3 times more likely to build a billion-dollar startup in their next try. Search for the problem to solve. Entrepreneurs typically find a problem to solve in a market, customer type, or trend. They may look for problems that are personally important to them or that are interesting to solve. However, it is not uncommon for billion-dollar startups to be founded by individuals who have been searching for a problem to solve for years. Ideation is a process by which new ideas are formed. Some ideas are developed internally within a company, while others are developed at a company but then spun out so as not to alienate its hardware partners. Another type of idea is developed at a university, and still, others come from venture capitalists. Founders who have a great idea but don't have the skills to execute it may find themselves unemployed, but there are also venture studios that specialize in helping startups to form. Finally, the founder market fit is key. The founders of a startup should have an understanding of the problem they're solving and a unique advantage they can bring to the table to make the idea a reality. Don't fall in love with your idea. Successful founders don't need to have a perfect idea right away, but they do need to recognize when to make changes. Pivots are common in business, and the startup community generally welcomes them. Many of the companies that have eventually seen billion-dollar valuations started with a completely different idea, and the founders made radical changes along the way. For example, YouTube started as a dating website, but after realizing the potential of video, the founders adopted the website to what it is now. When starting a business, it's important to remember that the market will not automatically embrace your product. You need to be open-minded and listen to your customers to make sure the pivot doesn't feel like a bus swerving. Keep the team small to make it easier to pivot. You may want to create a new company if either of the previous strategies does not work. Finally, make sure to check in with yourself and your co-founders to make sure you still have the passion for building the company. Software is eating the world, and the dominant companies are software companies. The largest sectors are business productivity software, like Slack, social/consumer and application software, like Snapchat, and e-commerce, like Wish, a shopping app featuring ultra-cheap items from wholesalers. The author discusses the different industries that are predicted to become billion-dollar companies in the next decade. Some of the industries that the authors mention include healthcare, technology, food, and insurance. The author also mentions that there are a lot of changes happening in different parts of the world, and that you need to pay attention to these changes to create billion-dollar companies. Some startups focus on making their product easier to use or more efficient, while others try to save their customers time or money. Billion-dollar startups that focus on productivity, like Slack and Gusto, are more likely to be successful. What successful companies do that sets them apart from the competition is they innovate, or come up with new ideas that are not typical. To be successful, a company needs to be highly differentiated in their product offering. This means that its product is different from the rest of the competition. The differentiations need not be something technical. It could be as simple as a user interface. Some startups create a new market opportunity, while others compete for market share. A startup can have advantages or disadvantages depending on the market they are entering. Finally, some ideas repeat and some don't, and it's hard to tell which ones will work until the right conditions are present. Timing is important for founders, as it can make or break a company. End of the summary. Thanks for listening.